you know me, Henry Mendoza. I'm interviewing you for the Voces Oral History Project at University of Texas, Austin. Please know, Susie, that this interview will be placed in the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection at the UT Austin campus. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we're not conducting this interview in person, I need to record your consenting. So I'll ask you some questions, 5 questions. Say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree. There are two questions we need to make sure you agree to before we go on. Voces wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation at the Benson Library, UT Austin. We will retain copyright and interview and any other materials you donate to Voces. Oh, Jesus. How did I lose it? Okay. You give your Voces your consent to archive your interview and your materials.
Yes, I agree.
Now, why can I not control this? Ah. I'm sure Monique is about to, oh, there we go. You give the consent, okay, you grant Voces copyright over the interview and any material you provide?
Yes, I do.
You agree to follow us, to allow us to post the interview on the internet where it will be viewed by people around the world?
I do.
And any of these questions is no, deals, oh, okay, no. We have many questions in the pre-interview form that we've already filled out. We use that information for pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept as in a secure Voces server. Please, before we send it to Benson, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members, so you'll be part of the public file. It will not be part of the public file. Your public file will only be accessible to the Benson Library. Do you wish to share the rest of your interview in your public file available for research at the Benson?
Yes, fine.
Like on occasion, we get requests from journalists and who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with photojournalists? With journalists?
Yes.
That's it.
Okay. I consented.
Thank you, Dominique. Oh my God. She had no idea what she was getting into when she offered to help me here. We've talked a little bit about it already, but I want to ask you what your initial thoughts and responses were when this started to break out, what, 6-8 months ago? Last 6-7 months?
Yeah. So first, thank you, Henry, for inviting me to be part of this. It's important that we hear voices. You know, for background, I represent almost 87 nonprofits organizations in the southern part of California called the Inland Empire, San Bernardino and Riverside County. And we help support, and in the world of nonprofit, it's called capacity building, but we help build the infrastructure for nonprofits. So when this happened, we were in the middle of working on several different projects, and we just had received significantly large grants to do some training for some foundation work, and then everything got put to a stop. I think being in the middle in terms of my own being a nonprofit and a leader in the community of color in the middle of this pandemic has also added a different layer of responsibility to respond to the crisis. I think none of us knew what was going to happen. And I think those of us that have fared better now, looking at it in hindsight, if you're asking that, those of us that pivoted quickly that looked at what we could do within the first 2 to 3 weeks are faring better now. And we recognized that we needed to be having difficult conversations early on and not waiting. And because time and money and our cash flows and the rest of us on how to do business every day was being put in jeopardy. So we work from small grassroots organizations, a faith-based organization, all volunteer, no paid staff that are just giving out food and clothing in the barrio out in Coachella, to hospitals, and Feeding America is one of our partnering agencies. So it was a spectrum of seeing even the large organizations struggling and the smaller ones drowning, right? The other, and I know we spoke a little earlier about this, disproportionately, what we also started to see, leaders of color were disproportionately not getting any support. And that was most evident in those communities of color, African-American leaders of nonprofits, as well as Latino-led nonprofits, most around social justice and immigrant services, were not eligible for many of the federal programs that were being offered for nonprofits. So that was our first kind of lens around the inequities and the injustices around it. And then we started to feel that we needed to have a voice around that. So that was our first wave of responding to COVID. Oh, you're muted. Henry, I didn't hear the question. You're muted.
I'm sorry.
That's
I don't
okay.
want to. I'm sorry. My bad. I'm not. For a guy that worked in television so long, it amazes me. I don't want to skip too far forward, but I do want to ask you about your first reaction to beyond the business side.
Yeah.
To people.
Yeah.
And the illness is striking. Do you recall when you first felt that, saw it? What?
Yeah. So I think at the beginning, like you're saying, it just seemed so far removed and we weren't seeing a lot of cases here. And then, I have an elderly mother who lives in a residential facility, for Alzheimer's. And, that became, like you said, then comes the real world of us as families and communities that I can't hug my child, right? For us, I can't go see her. She lives in, Costa Mesa, not an hour away from where I live. But I mean, the fact that something really tragic is happening and I can't go to my sister's home and my brother and my family, who we as Latinos rely on one another. And, we did the Zoom calls and all the rest, but it just, like you said, un abrazo, the idea that I just need you to know that you're okay, right? I just needed to, and I still to this day have not, since March the 21st, have not been able to hug my daughter. And because I have an elderly mother who's at high risk and family members here in my home that are, I cannot risk them nor the home I'm living in for that. And it changes everything. And that was the first time for me that I started realizing, okay, this is kind of scary. And then I had the nephews and the nieces, and some of them are, are essential workers. And now I'm worried about them. And then that's whole kind of what can I do? I seem to work in the world of work, right? That I'm in this world where I'm in task force with county officials and all the rest. But the thing that matters is my family, right? My family is at risk, and what can I do for them, right? We started to educate ourselves because of the misinformation, right? Here comes then the wave of misinformation around the disease and what you can and cannot do. And especially in Latino families, right? Is there, pues, the doctor told me, or, I read that you just have to make sure that, they have all these stories, right? Because estamos afuera, we're outside, we're no worries. We can see each other outside. And then you're having to deal with family members that really don't understand the science around how horrible this pandemic is. So then it became a charge to let's share information that's accurate with each other. So we know what we're doing, right? And we know how we're going to protect ourselves, because we also recognize that families, And I started then seeing families of friends that weren't listening starting to get sick, right? That came the next one.
You did.
Yeah, we're just gonna have cena on Sunday. On Friday, my mom wanted to see us. There's only 12 of us, and 6 of them get sick, right? And then it's a friend that his twin brother. Then it starts getting closer, right? First, you don't know anybody, and now it's like people we know are getting sick. People we know are dying of this disease, and they're not old, right? And then my mother's facility. That comes the next one. Someone at my mother's facility tests positive. Now it's in my house. Now it's my mom. And then you go through all the helplessness and all the rest of it. And you realize you're not alone. There's a lot of people like me and my family sitting here praying for my mother, but not going to be able to go see her and hold her hand and see how she's doing, or talking to her in Spanish to make sure she understands what's happening, that why we haven't come to see her. You know, it's all of those kinds of things. And so you're living in this world that just is.
No, you're living in several worlds.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It is. There is just, I'm bombarded by every day something new. And then you add, the worst for me is then you add the political layer of the uncertainty and the craziness of this administration and our country. In the middle of a pandemic, then you have to worry about this, losing our rights, losing our, looking at, defending our rights as Latinos, as, people of color. That becomes now attacked on and above this pandemic. So it's just, the weeks turn into 40 hours to 60-hour weeks because you're working on multiple projects, because you feel like you have to have a voice. It's not, the problem becomes you can't be silent anymore. You have to speak to power. You need to be in the room where people are making decisions. That was our conversation, you and I, Henry. So I need to sit in the county. Maybe I don't want to hear all the politics, but if I'm not in the room, I can't let them know, hey, when you tell us, Imperial County is growing because we got Mexicans coming across from Mexico in our hospitals, I can push back on an elected official in that room, in that Zoom call, and say, no, sir. Respectfully, I can say the people coming into the United States are not Mexicans that are from Mexico. They're American citizens coming into the United States asking for medical treatment. They can't just be making comments like that and us not speaking to power. So those are some of the stories for us, but they're just relentless. It's every week, and it becomes overwhelming for a person. I mean, for me, I just sometimes have to check out for at least a day or two.
You mentioned, and you kind of, because of my knowledge of the Southern California, you mentioned Coachella and Imperial. Could you, without belaboring it, talk about that whole area between Los Angeles and the Nevada border and the Arizona border and everything and then also related, you talk about your daughter living in Orange County, in Costa Mesa.
Yeah.
That's why I said these are different worlds.
Different worlds. And even in Coachella Valley, you have the most affluent communities in Coachella Valley. You have Palm Springs and Indian Wells and La Quinta. Miles to the left, you're in Mecca Thermal, Coachella, Indio, right? Nothing but migrant and trailer parks and people that don't have air conditioning, and their COVID numbers are just skyrocketing, right? Amongst the immigrant population. And because they live in multiple family homes, right? It's not one family when one gets sick, they all get sick in the trailer park or in the apartment where there's 7 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and there's no place for them to isolate. So I think for me is I've had the privilege to sit, because of the work I do with nonprofits, is I see these heroic heroes. They're these just powerful people in nonprofits out there that are doing the hard work, that are the front line of that group. One of them is TODEC, TODEC. They work around immigrant right justice. Alianza is another nonprofit out in Coachella Valley that they are the warriors that are standing there and helping, supporting nonprofits out in these very rural communities that are just, the inequities in terms of getting healthcare and services and education is just without reproach, to be candid. Yeah.
Yeah. My career started at the Riverside paper a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then been around the block a few times. And then I wound up, my last real journalism job was again at the Riverside paper as executive sports editor. And as such, I decided, my wife and I decided the drive was ugly.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a small place in Palm Springs on the north end.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I was reintroduced to an area that I had seen when a friend of my dad's moved his restaurant from Colton, where I was raised, to the edge of Palm Springs. And it was a long time ago. And it was called Las Cazuelas.
Ah.
They're all over the valley now. And you don't call it Palm Springs, it's the Coachella Valley.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's just grown so much. In that area you're talking about, outside of Orange County, how many bodies are you serving, helping, roughly?
Yeah. So right now, let me get because the doggy was barking. So I was trying to think, for us in terms of the COVID cases, for them, I mean, the highest numbers in the state right now are coming out of Riverside County, and because of Imperial County and them moving in. We were at 900 a day here in San Bernardino. Our numbers were we're in the red zone for us in these San Bernardino and Riverside County for the state of California to reopen. We are being looked at nationally because our numbers are so high. And again, that has, without question, unequivocally has to do with us living in a conservative elected counties, right, where mask wearing continues to be a subject of conversation at city council meetings. And there is no, bars are still open, restaurants are still open, nail salons are still open in our communities. It's not, no one's adhering to good health policy. And so I think within the last week, we're at least bringing it back into conversations at these big task force meetings, but it becomes problematic for all of us. And the results of that is the communities of color are the ones disproportionately being affected by those not having any kind of unified voice around it. So we as nonprofits have decided we're no longer waiting for elected officials to be pushing out a messaging. We now are meeting as a nonprofit alliance group, a COVID task force of just nonprofits. We've decided, let's unify our own voice around it. We're going to do it in English. We're going to do it in Spanish. We're going to talk about the science around why you need to wear a mask, why you need to wash your hands. I mean, they're as simple as that, but so important. And coming from trusted partners. That's the other part. The idea that because of what's happening with the country, Coachella Valley, predominantly undocumented families are living out there. They don't trust anyone or anybody. So, but nonprofits are already in your communities. We're already in your homes. The message coming from us is listened to more. So I think we have a moral obligation to also make sure that we're going to make sure that they get the message that isn't been given to them by our elected officials and our communities that have not addressed it and just literally just ignored them.
Yeah. The strange thing about what you're talking about, to me, as somebody who's been in and out of that area since my childhood, is that while your constituency and what you're talking about, mm-hmm. It also includes some of the wealthiest people in the world.
Yes.
Palm Desert, La Quinta,
yep.
I've played at a golf course where your annual membership's $100,000.
Yep. Yep.
And Daryl Gates,
yeah.
Daryl Gates, the Gates family has,
yeah.
The money, and yet down the street, the people that are gardening, I call them my cousins.
Yeah.
Who's doing the work?
Yeah.
The LA Times finally ran a story last week about the ignored
Yes.
farm workers.
Yes.
Hello?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, and what you have is a southern microcosm of what goes up the state all the way to San Francisco and beyond, actually, the
Right.
Central Valley. How do you communicate across those lines?
It's been a challenge, to be honest. And I think that, and then you kind of overlaying it with, you have people in the state right now trying to do the census work, right?
Oh.
Then you have COVID added to the layer. And, everyone's thinking, okay, we looked like our numbers were good around census, but now they're just not so strong anymore, right? Because of COVID. So, then you have to realize, okay, we're going to be lucky to get them to even let us in or knock on their doors for, let alone try to get census stuff, right? But we need to say, now we're at a point this isn't a matter of life and death for them. These communities are, just being decimated by COVID right now. And their eviction notices are up. We had meetings last week around that because they're afraid, the state, what's his name, Newsom had done the whole thing with they couldn't evict, but that is not what is happening to our undocumented families, right? They know, the landlords know that they're not going to complain. So they're evicting already, and they're moving into like tents in front of trailer parks and at 122 degrees last week in Coachella. So it's the heat with no air conditioning and conditions where people are sick. It just, it is unimaginable. And like you say, the disparity about seeing, the Annenberg Foundation and the wealth that happens within a block of each other, it just speaks to the inequities in this country, to be honest. Yeah.
Those inequities always, we had a little condominium in a little old part of Palm Springs, and the inequities, I was forbidden from talking to the gardeners because I could speak Spanish. Forbidden, right?
Yeah.
How do those communication lines,
Mm-hmm.
I worked on the census 2010.
Yeah.
That was hard enough. And now you're adding a whole other layer of distrust and
in the middle of it. Yeah.
doubts.
I think the work of people like Luz Gallegos, and I would really recommend you interview her. She's out in Coachella, like on the front lines, and she's smart. She's one of the few organizations that just got some federal dollars to help with rental assistance for undocumented people out in Coachella Valley. But also she's been affected by families and her own team that are COVID and have passed away. COVID, because they're in these communities, she also puts herself at risk and her staff at risk because they're coming in and out of these homes and communities to help these families. And that's really a voice that needs to be heard, right?
Where is she, India?
She's in Coachella. Her office is in Paris, right? In Paris.
I don't know, yeah.
And then she's got a satellite office out in Coachella.
Okay.
Her name is Luz Gallegos from TODEC. She's amazing. And she was selected by the Latino Community Foundation as a nonprofit of the year. So we're really proud of her because she comes from she's one of us, so, una de las hermanas aquí. So she's an extraordinary woman. So is Sylvia Paz from Alianza. She's out there in Coachella too. She's one of those persons that went to Harvard and, grew up in there, migrant family, went to get her degree and came back into the community, and she's serving the community and rallying around the immigrant population and other nonprofits that are Spanish-speaking nonprofits out there. So, those are the people, the voices that they really are the ones you should talk to about Coachella.
One of the other topics on my list, suggested topics, is education. I'm sorry to bring it up, but that's like talk about another world. That's another subject in another world.
Yeah.
How are you dealing with that?
I think, we sit in these weekly task force meetings. We're on number 18 since it started. So every week they are holding these coalition meetings where you have the people from the governor's office now. Oops, sorry, that's the doggy.
Yeah.
Charlie, people from elected officials, local officials, health department, county officials from both counties. And we first started, it was a few of us, maybe 20 or so. And now we're at like 60 or 70 every week that show up to this weekly COVID task force meeting, right? And the conversation last week was around education. And luckily people like Sylvia and Luz were on the call, and they were talking about, you guys are saying things about what we need to, are children staying home? Are they going back to school? In Coachella, there has no internet. So they haven't had any school since March, right? So disproportionately, they're already way farther behind than anybody else talking about in Riverside and San Bernardino County, right? So they're now trying to work on trying to get them internet service, and they're going after bigger foundations like the California Endowment, who wants to go out in Coachella and maybe set up satellite kinds of things, and some other foundations that are going to put in a lot more money to kind of shore up some of the inequities in terms of having access to education. But certainly, again, it's how do they expect to open in these school districts that are already poor and lack resources? And now you're going to put in, PPEs and protection and cleaning and all the rest. It's undoable for them, right?
Big numbers.
Big numbers, yeah.
And big problems, big issues.
Yeah. And then you have the opposite, like you're saying though. Then you have the wealthy communities are saying, well, we don't have numbers like that in Lake Arrowhead, or we don't have those numbers in Big Bear, right? So we want our kids to go back to school. And just like Orange County, right? Costa Mesa, they all want their kids to go back, but they're not seeing the numbers that we're seeing in poor neighborhoods and communities where it would be a higher risk for them. So it is always that lens of inequity that, it's been these harder decisions to have to be made.
Yeah. Let me ask you, where are you headed now?
So that is a good question for us. I think that we want to continue to be a voice for support to nonprofits and our communities of color, as well as the constituents that we serve. Nonprofits are the ones that fill gaps in services, and right now they know for us, we know the statistic, more than 37% of us won't be here in 6 months in the Inland Empire. Nonprofits won't be able to keep their doors open because they haven't been able to get money or see clients to get funded. So a third of us are going to be gone within a year. Some believe it might be more, right? That's a reality about that. And I think that we have an obligation then to help support and make them sustainable, those of us that are still working, still trying to do the work, that we can start working smarter together, start leveraging the work of a collective voice. And most notably, we're shifting. So that is a good question. We have formally moved our agenda to be around advocacy. That's something that we really work just on the capacity building component, but we realize now how important it is for us to have a unified voice around what we want to see in our communities, and that we're going to play a bigger part around that advocacy voice.
We're a big state,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a big region. Your daughter lives in Costa Mesa. What is that? 60 miles as the crow flies?
Yeah.
But it's a different world. In terms of all the issues you just brought up, nonprofits, education, to school, not to school, housing.
It's not on their radar, right? It's not, right? It is not. I think though what is hopeful for me is what I think, because we've had conversations with them when this whole Black Lives Matter thing came, right? It's this generation, my daughter's generation, right? She says, Mom, she goes, okay, she goes, si se puede days, right? I'm remembering now when she was little, I used to take her to marches, on my shoulders when she was little, no uvas and whatever. She was one of the, that was my college days, right? But she was little and I was a single mom, and she would go with me with all these kind of events, social justice kind of work I did. And here we are. And she never was really interested in it until now. So I said to her, Mija, it matters. It matters what you buy, who you buy. You know, you guys live in this world where you don't see it every day, but you know I do. So there, you have an obligation to have a voice for those that don't have a voice, right? When you guys, my nieces and nephews, they all are very doing well for themselves. I said, this is the time where you help others that don't. This is a time where your voice, when you hear something that's not true, you speak to that, right? You have a moral obligation now to have an opinion, right? And to have, and your money, where you guys spend your money, just start there. Who do you shop and where do you shop and what do they represent, right? That was her. You the whole thing of makeup. Well, start with one thing, right? Make a decision about, you're going to decide where your dollars go, where you spend your money, who supports what. Make sure they're causes that count, right? You can afford to do that. Support things today that matter. You're talking about all the things you're hearing. Donate to ACLU. You become a member, Marisa. That's the first thing you do, right? You say, what can I do, Mom? What can we do? Yes, someone else is going to fight for you, but your money is going to be needed for that, right? So it was just like having them, but I appreciated that they asked, because normally they're blind to that because they live in these worlds where that's not part of their daily life. Yeah.
I find it, you brought up some subjects. A lot has come together in the last year. The Black Lives Matter issue because of a killing. The economy that's being impacted. Mm-hmm. I mean, you referred to Coachella as Coachella, mm-hmm. And it's only on the map. Well, it's mostly on the map because of a rock concert.
Yes.
But that was a dark, when I was a kid, and when the Delgado family created Las Cazuelas out there, mm-hmm. We'd drive out there to have dinner at their restaurant, and you go beyond Palm Springs, it was dark.
Yeah.
And now it's one big valley.
Yeah.
And you go over the hill and there's Costa Mesa. I mean, my God, the worlds that come together there. How do you help serve them together as nonprofits?
I think it's around the education part that you brought up, Henry. It is around the education, right? Because I think that there's so much misinformation or inaccurate information that's being thrown out in this world, and that's just what's known now in this last 3 years. No one trusts the messengers, regardless of what side you're on, right? And I think that now we're resorting to trying to find, like, go directly to the scientists, go directly to the doctors, right? And that's what we're putting on calls now. We're no longer, the trusted messengers, even CDC, right? When would you think that the CDC would not be someone that you trusted in what they were telling you? But it's become politicized. So now what are you resorting to? We call the doctors at Loma Linda. Can you sit on a call for us? Because we can't even use the guidelines for CDC anymore because they're irrelevant, right? So next week at this weekly meeting, right, we're going to put pediatricians on the call with doctors to talk to these people, to have conversations about why it's important that children and the rest of them, right? You can ask questions to the doctors. I think that that's our next steps. We're having to be more strategic around how information is being given, because the trusted ways of news and media and TV and all that has become like this just noise, right? Where people can just pick what they want to hear. If you're only listening to Fox, you think you're in another world. I'm sorry, I'm just being political, but that's true. You'd side by side, if you watch, Rachel Maddow's at 6 o'clock or whatever, and you watch Fox News, you think you're living in two different countries because they're so different in terms of what you're hearing. So I think at that point, there's such divisiveness about how we hear news and information that we are now having to make a different ways on how we receive it, right?
Without getting too personal.
Right.
Where were you born?
I was born here in San Bernardino and raised in Colton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Colton, that's right. I remember we had mutual.
My parents are from Mexico, though.
But is it different now from when you were a 10-year-old?
Oh, I think so. I mean, you know, Colton, right? They have really high numbers too. So, you know, it's kind
Do
of
they?
scary for me. Super high numbers in Colton, like disproportionate for their population. Um,
That's
but
the only thing disproportionate for that population. I mean, go
yeah,
ahead. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, it's true. So, yeah, I think, well, certainly there's a lack of civility, right? Really, in the world now. I think that that's the biggest difference from our generation, and we're older than you see now. Is just open, you know, hostility and just divisiveness. But really, it's a lack of civility. I think today, because of the, you know, listening to the John, oh my God, I'm going blank right now. The one who just passed away. Oh my gosh, only because my brain is 4 hours of sleep. The civil rights leader,
Oh,
that
John Lewis.
John Lewis. Yes, yes, yes.
There was quite a ceremony.
Yes, yes, today I was watching it and it just
I know.
moved to tears, right?
Yeah.
And what happened to the world of that, where there was decency and integrity and honesty and a person that had a moral, you know, character that wanted to do something good for a community, right? There are not that many people like that anymore that you see that are willing to risk everything, you know, to do what's right, to say what's right. So I think that's what's missing right now. We don't have a voice around decency, maybe.
Curious times. Algo más? I mean, God, I mean, I'm a little frustrated because I feel like you're in the middle of this and you know much more ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Now what? You know? I
I
mean,
think
where are we headed? Where's it all headed?
I think it is going to get worse before it gets better. I honestly, I think now you're feeling that difference. Like, you know, people were waiting, like you said at the beginning, when you first questions you were asking me when it first started, people kind of thought it was, well, it's this novelty thing, but there was kind of everyone was trying to talk with each other, and it was still kind of, then there came the realization things are bad, right? Then this panic, right? Then it was like hanging on by nails. The organizations that started realizing, okay, I'm not opening my doors. I can't do services, right? And now comes this thing, well, maybe there's some hope with these dollars, there's going to be a fund. Someone's going to give us extra money to keep us going, right? And when most of them found out it was only for 2 months, it can't keep you going, right? That money's gone now. And now the realization is this kind of hopelessness, but also what we're seeing is a lot of, we're calling it the scarcity mindset, or kind of the infighting, you know, Lord of the Flies kind of stuff going on, where you're seeing, okay, who's going to survive and who's not? And you're seeing that kind of just grabbing on to whatever they have, and they're not sharing anymore because it's a question of survival, right? We're trying to move away. Hopefully, that's my hope, is that we're going to be smarter. We don't start going to our worst of who we can be in humanity, and we move closer to what is possible, and we start helping one another, right? We'll fare better that way than the idea that we start just picking sides and sitting in corners, not trying to talk with one another.
Having graduated from Colton High School in 1965,
Yeah, I'm a 76 graduate.
Part of what I've learned, the world has gotten smaller for me, and that used to be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife continues to be surprised by some of the people that I know and I'm around from my days in Colton.
Yeah.
Some pretty strong people.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, and I kind of like the fact that we seem to have the best of all worlds at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still the case, and is that a good thing now?
I think it's harder to find now. Like
Yeah.
you say, I came from a time, even like my dad was a police officer in Colton. It was a small town. Most of us knew each other, right? You went to Colton High, everyone knew each other, right? If, you know,
Yeah.
football games, and that was the world. That is not the world we live in now. You know, things are so different. And you think about that generation of children now, even during this COVID, this world is such a different place for them, even coming out of college or high school or any kind of their whole experience. This will be marked by, their life will be marked by this event that's happening today. COVID will change the way all of us look at the world based on this endpoint in our history, right? And so I say, what can we leave for, you know, my daughter and her children, right? That's the role that we have now, right? Because we can't go back to the way things were. I don't think that's ever going to be possible again based on what happened. And not just the COVID, but I think also what has happened politically in our country. I think there is no coming back from how divisive, and I say divisive again, but just so the meanness about everything, right? How people treat one another. It'll take a while to heal. So I'm hopeful for the generation that comes next after us, Henry, the ones that will be here and fixing and changing it into a place that they will. Maybe we had to come to this bottom part in order for us to come back out in a better place. I'm hoping for that.
You know, this question occurred to me earlier, and I neglected to bring it up. Is everything you do now, does that include a political, not agenda, but a layer of politics?
I think, to be honest, if people say no, I think they would be lying, to be honest. Everything has to be filtered that way now, because in the world now, that's how everyone is receiving information, right? From wearing a mask. When does become a mask wearing thing becomes I'm either conservative or I'm not, or I'm a Trump or I'm not. But that's where we're at, right? So the idea that even how we present information at a meeting, how we talk to one another, you assume then there's people in the room that don't agree with your politics, right? Which means everything changes on how you present, right? I think the difference now is that it's come to a precipice where it doesn't matter anymore, though. We need to, before it was always you're careful, right? I'll be careful at a meeting because I know there could be other ideas in the room. But now it's important to just say what's true, right? That's the difference. The difference now is you can't just let it be polite, because look what's polite's been doing. You let them own it as truth, and that then just erodes the work that people before us have done, and the work that we're doing is if you don't speak to power. We need to say when someone in a room that's an elected official says something like Mexicans are coming across and going into our hospitals and using $10,000, what did he say? It's $10,000 for a helicopter ride, and then we're paying, that's our tax dollars, right, to get these Mexicans to go into hospitals that are, you know, it was craziness, right? And I kept waiting. Someone going to say something? Someone going to say something? And then nobody said anything. And it was that moment, Henry, when I said, okay, it's not okay for him to say that, right? Because if I leave it in the room and there's 87 people in the room, they're all going to believe that what he said is true, and it's not, right? And then I said, respectfully, I'm going to push back on that, I said to him. And I said, and it was dead cricket silence after I said it. And then the person moderating the thing changed the subject, right? But I said, I can't live with myself to say, I sat in a room and I let that happen and I didn't say something, right? Then I become that too. Everyone's afraid to say something. So we have to speak to power. It's imperative right now in this environment. So maybe we'll leave it maybe at that.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I was going to say is there was a time where had I done this interview 20 years ago,
yeah,
same circumstances, I would have said, well, let's leave the politics out of this. But you can't.
You can't. It's sad, huh?
Well.
Maybe we just do the work different, though. Now it requires the work to be done different, right?
Is there something else you want to tell me?
I'm trying to think. Is there anything, like, let's say good news. Let's try to think of good that's happened because of this. I will say.
I mean, frankly, the webinar you told me about that you're even on an organized basis addressing the needs of nonprofits.
Yeah, the idea that we started helping support technical assistance around the PPP loans and the EIDL loans. Yeah, it was important because we knew that nonprofits didn't have the capacity.
Well, when did you do that?
We did it like in April. We were doing it like right
That's
after.
early.
Really early. We started super early, and then we got funded for it. So we did it saying, okay, we're just going to do this, all of us. We're not getting paid for this. We're not a grant for this, but this is the thing we need to help them with, because if they don't get this money, they're not going to be their doors open. So we did it, and then the foundation started noticing us, and the first round of what they call rapid response funding came out through one of the local foundations, and we applied, and we said, well, we'd love to get paid for some of this TA we're offering, and then they funded us, and then we asked another foundation, and they funded us. So we now have funding not only for us to help nonprofits get some help, but also how to make sure that they get their loans forgiven, because that's going to be another part. That whole crazy nightmare, and every week they're changing the rules at the feds, you know, and how you're going to get these grants forgiven or this loans forgiven. So we're working still with them at the end. So that's how.
Go ahead.
No, I said, I think that's the reason I think it was important for us to see. We started seeing them early on, the group, all of them asking for support. I think we did 287 nonprofits is what we've helped so far.
Oh my.
And, yeah. And then we realized too, businesses started calling us. And we, someone says, well, somebody from Coachella Valley, a business guy called it, does a podcast for Una Visión, right? He says, you know, can you help us? And I said, well, we've been doing nonprofits, but it's still, loans are for, goes, well, can you guys do it in Spanish? So me and my colleague, she translated everything. We did it on a podcast for them, out for business, little restaurants, barbershops, all in Coachella Valley. We had like 37 businesses sign up, and for us to support them. So we started helping them. You know, it's important that we all, like, it's just not just nonprofits. We're helping our community be here when this is all over. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Dominique's good. She reminded me, and I'm in Los Angeles.
Yes.
You are where?
In the Inland Empire. I'm actually in San Bernardino.
Okay.
60 miles from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
And we cover the full counties, so all the way to Needles, Palm Springs, and to out to the Arizona border, to San Diego. It's the largest 2 counties in the country. Charlie.
No. Oh no, not at all. I can't thank you enough on 2 levels. One is your content it's going to be the highlight of my participation in our weekly call Friday, because, well, I love doing interviews, and I'm learning so much, and I love what you're doing and what you represent, and that's not my business, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I'm learning so much about, we've interviewed a guy from Texas.
Oh, interesting.
Who now lives in the Midwest. He's been around even longer than me. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting and I've been around enough to see some of the places in Texas, yeah. And El Paso, and through the journalism group. And people forget, but the worlds you deal with and represent are right here in the shadow of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And they can be pretty drastically different.
It seems like not so far away, but it does make
it
geographically. There's such a diverse communities in California, right? It is a reflection of our diversity.
And if you there's a huge desert out there that presumably nobody lives in, but
yeah. Out to North Shore, yeah.
¿Algo más?
No, todo bien.
I don't know. Go ahead.
You need to make introductions for Luz if you need to, but I'm happy.
Yeah, I will. I'll email you and ask for those, because
if you need other people, they're super great advocates and have very articulate around the topic.
Well, I love the regions you represent or deal with.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Thank you, Henry, for thinking of me. I'm really.
Are you kidding?
appreciate this
Well,
opportunity.
you know, to be honest, I was asked to make a list a couple of weeks ago, and I started making a list, and I said, "Oh wait, I forgot."
Hey, I'm so glad.
And I
Yeah.
got to you first, so good.
Thank you, Henry. Good.
Thank
Well,
you.
I appreciate it. Be safe, and hopefully we'll hear whatever we can do too to help Navidad. I'm here, so
You know,
I have a special place in my heart for you guys.
my, I just have a tough time right now, and that's where I'm stuck.
Mm.
We would be asking people who I presume several of the companies I know are helping already to give us, well, why do we need to add
Yeah.
that step? And secondly, is there a danger we create for the people that work for us on that weekend?
Yep.
It seems, I mean, I don't have an answer for that right now, other than it seems like.
But I think there is a way you could do it. Like you said, if we did, because we thought about it too, is probably going to cancel, or could we do it? And then we think, but we probably could do it because we have a lot of organizations right now that are doing the food stuff, right? And
Yeah.
they every week, and they're all volunteers, and they're doing 50 to 100 volunteers that are showing up to load up boxes and sort out food and handing them out. They're just not getting out of their cars, right? Kind of like
Keep thinking about that.
yeah.
And we'll talk again about Navidad.
Okay, well, whatever I can do to support it, we'd
Yeah.
be happy to try to look at a plan too, and
Yeah.
maybe just do a model to see how we're going to think about
Yeah.
it. If we're going to do
Yeah.
it, what would it look like? So then you could present it to them.
Yeah.
Good, good.
Okay, thank
Bien.
you.
Gracias.
Hasta
Bendiciones.
luego.
Hasta luego. Adiós. Bye.